Hello, welcome to The Collision. I'm Daniel Blackaby, and I'm here to talk about one of the most controversial and interesting films of the year, so let's get into it. Well, leading up to the release of this movie, there's a lot of strong opinions from critics, from viewers that had early screenings, and from media outlets, very strong and very different opinions on this film. You have the one side, you have a lot of people saying this is a masterpiece, this is an amazing superhero comic book movie film. On the other hand, you have a lot of media outlets raising this hysteria. This is a dangerous film. There were reports on opening night of security threats in theaters, some theaters refusing to show the movie. This is a complicated movie, which makes it a complicated movie to talk about. So we'll kind of walk through a little bit of it. But let's start with the film itself. The film, just from kind of a technical aspect, is a very expertly made film. The music is used very well. The cinematography is very interesting and inventive. But the main thing to talk about with this movie is the performance by Joaquin Phoenix. The Joker is probably one of the most iconic villains in all of fandom and all of storytelling, in all of cinema. It's been, various A-list actors have brought him to life. The most famous being Heath Ledger with his Oscar-winning performance. So as many people are curious, could Joaquin Phoenix, a great actor in his own right, could he bring the Joker to life in a way that was as iconic and as captivating and mesmerizing as Heath Ledger did it several years ago? And the answer is yes. This is a very, very different movie from the Christopher Nolan's trilogy. It's a very different Joker, a very different character that's being portrayed, but Joaquin Phoenix in this role is outstanding, and it's in some ways, as I'll share in a second, even as the film seems to fall apart, and kind of feel empty, his performance alone is enough to just keep your eyes glued to the screen as you're waiting to see what's going to happen. It's a very nuanced performance, but definitely his performance alone is almost worth the price of admission. As I said earlier, there's kind of two approaches, two very strong opinions towards this film. On the one hand, you have it. People saying this is a very masterful work of art that sheds light on an important issue of mental health. And on the other side, you have those that are condemning it as this is a very dangerous film. This needs to be shunned. So to look at the two things, I want to look at both these, and I think both these kind of polarized opinions are somewhat misguided. The first, as far as this being a dangerous film, there was a lot of kind of fear-fueled hysteria leading up to the film, which just proved to be overhyped, to be driven more by fear than by just common sense or logic. And the film itself, it earned its R rating. This is kind of following after Logan and Deadpool is sort of an R-rated comic book film, and it definitely earns it. There's profanity, there's violence, but the way it handles the violence, although the violence can be shocking, it can be quite graphic, it's handled in a very kind of serious, weighty way that it's horrifying to watch, but that's the point, that it's showing kind of the brutality and the evilness of this. It's not glamorizing the violence or the evil that is done, and throughout the movie, as the Joker character becomes kind of more into his iconic villain persona, never do you get the sense that this is a good thing or this is a hero for us to emulate or follow. The film's pretty clear that this is a kind of a failure of culture and a failure of the Joker's character to act this way, and it's not a film that I believe has the power to inspire others to take out the mantle and don a clown mask and start acting crazy in society. The other main theme, again, this movie is somewhat ambiguous. It's not a preachy movie, although it has some kind of clear themes. So in some ways, it's hard to kind of get to the message of the film and what is this film trying to say. And often, the more I thought about it, just kind of getting a little frustrated trying to figure out so what am I supposed to be feeling about this movie? What is it trying to communicate, if anything? Or is it just sort of spectacle? But the one talking point kind of leading up to the film was sort of how this film would handle the issue of mental health. It's a topic that is rightly being talked about a lot more in our society now than it has in the past. And this film dives right into it. The Joker character, Arthur Fleck is his non-Joker name, is a very severely mentally ill individual, and the film doesn't specify exactly what his illness is, but it kind of piles on. He has sort of the whole range of illnesses. He's obsessive. He's delusional. He has uncontrollable laughter. He has kind of seeing things that aren't there. He kind of has the whole range of these issues, and in some ways he kind of represents, in a metaphorical way, the sort of mental health, and the kind of encapsulates that segment of society and how too often they're looked down upon, they're mistreated. And the story, in some ways, although not at all in a very kind of clear allegorical way or anything, it seems to be presenting the idea that this group of society is so often they're ignored. Arthur Fleck in the film, his main thing is just to be noticed, for someone to acknowledge that he exists. It's what drives him to do stand-up comedy. Ultimately, it's sort of what drives him to commit some of the deeds that he does, is just to be noticed, just to be acknowledged that he's a human person. And on paper, this kind of on a conceptual level, this idea of mental health, and kind of trying to expose the mistreatment and the danger that happens when we kind of shun and ignore kind of the down and out and the needy. There was potential there to be a quite powerful story, and to speak on an issue that needs to be speaked on. But unfortunately, the way Joker handles kind of the issue of mental health in this film is somewhat disrespectful, and in some ways it undercuts its own message that it's trying to communicate. The film is trying to show the danger and the evil of mistreating these individuals. But because the Joker character is so kind of amplified and psychopathic and has so many kind of undefined mental illnesses that in a way, it, rather than kind of alleviating the fear of society and humanizing these individuals, it does the opposite, and it kind of fuels more increased fear. And that as the Joker, the more he kind of embraces the Joker persona, the more, as an audience member, I was thinking, this character, he should be feared. This is a character that is a danger to society, and that the people in the Gotham citizens in the film are right to be wary of him as he begins to stalk people and show up unannounced and eventually commit some horrible deeds. And in this way, it's almost unfortunate that I think what the film was trying to do in a conceptual way was humanize his character and shed light on this, but in the end it ended up almost doing the opposite, and in showing such an extreme case, it kind of undercuts its own message. Well, in the end, I don't think Joker is a bad movie. It's definitely not a technically bad movie. I mentioned in my written review of the film that it's almost like watching a car crash, where it's not good, doesn't do anything for you, doesn't make you feel any way, but you just, despite that, almost in a guilty way, you just can't look away. And I found myself, I was never bored in the movie, and I was constantly kind of drawn into Joaquin Phoenix's performance in the film. But in the end, I left the theater just feeling very empty. That I feel like the film didn't communicate anything. It didn't do anything for me. It didn't satisfy emotionally or intellectually. It just sort of was. The film wants to be a deep character study of the Joker, but it doesn't have a whole lot to say about humanity or the human character. His character is more of a ticking time bomb than it is any sort of interesting kind of moral dilemmas or decisions that his turn to the Joker, rather than feeling like it's an ethical thing or he's wrestling within himself, an internal struggle, it feels very inevitable that from the start, as soon as you're introduced to his character, you know where it's leading. The only question is kind of when it will happen, and the events that lead him to become the Joker are very out of his control. It's just things that happen to him either through his own mental health or things that happen in society, which makes it a very far less interesting turn, as it sort of it takes some of the human choice out of it, which just makes it a far less interesting character study. And I think in some ways the film wrestles between the extreme. It wants to be a comic book origin story for its villain, but it also wants to be a deep kind of artistic film that looks at mental health. And in the end, these two extremes kind of pull it back and forth, and it's never able to really firmly land in either camp. And in the end, I left the theater feeling somewhat dissatisfied and empty in the experience. But what about you? Have you seen the movie? This movie, even before it was released, was just spawning debate and discussion, and there's definitely a lot to talk about. So I'd love to talk about it with you. If you have a very different take than I do, I'd love to hear it. If you notice some things that maybe I didn't notice, I'd love to hear those as well. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to this channel to keep up with all our video content. I want to thank you for watching and hope you will continue to collide with your world for Christ.